thought military transition would mostly affect my husband, but I quickly realized it was affecting our entire family. Well, coming from a place where I didn't even know we were transitioning, now just looking back, I'm explaining what we went through. Because if you listened to a few episodes before this, probably episode 2 of season 7, where I talk about not knowing that I was a military spouse and just living through the military spouse life. So just to take you a little bit back, when he was leaving the military, so that's what we normally call transitioning out. If you're military, you will definitely understand this. If you're not, you will still relate, because it's just a major transition, just part of something as change and transition, as I've always been talking about. So he came home with a packet of stuff, like a lot of flyers, and I remember looking at them and going, oh wow, this is interesting. I've never seen someone retiring, because that's what you were saying, was retiring from the military and come home with a lot of information. It's like, wow, this is strange, but curiosity got me looking into all that stuff. And in one of those, I see somewhere written military resources for the military spouse, and I'm like, wow. Military spouse, what's that? Google, my friend. And an entire world opens up. So that was, part of our transition. I am learning what a military spouse is. He is transitioning out of the military. This was starting to affect our entire family. Our routines were changing. Our future felt a little uncertain, like not very uncertain, but there were things that I now didn't know what was going to be like. And the structure we had built around that life, that we had built life around for years, was now beginning to disappear. And I didn't know it then, but this was another major transition. And I will repeat, if you're in the military, you definitely do understand this, but it's a major transition in the lives of not just the service members, but the family as well. Hi, my name is Lydia, and here I share real stories in the context of transition, so we can understand life. And because change is constant and it's what happens around us, but transition is what happens within us. And while many people focus on external milestones, career change, marriage, motherhood, relocation, retirement, I've learned that what shapes us most deeply is often the internal adjustment underneath those experiences. This channel is for people who want to move through life intentionally, people who want to understand themselves, navigate change more consciously, because it's inevitable and life is a constant change. And we want to build lives that feel aligned internally, not just looking stable externally. I've lived through many transitions: immigration, military life, career reinvention over 3 times, motherhood over 3 times, mental health struggles. I had depression, identity shifts, so many that I can't count, building community and starting over multiple times. And one thing I've learned is this: unprocessed transitions do not disappear, they accumulate. That is why here we name those transitions that quietly shape us, because we have decided that we're not going to be passengers in our own lives. Neither are we just going to exist, but we will thrive. You're in the right place. Let's get back to the story. So by this point, military life had shaped many years of our family structure. Even before I fully understood the identity of military spouse, our lives had already adapted around military systems. Deployments, relocations, uncertainty, schedules changing unexpectedly, building life around assignments instead of long-term predictability. That structure had become our normal. So when retirement and transition out of military life approached, I thought I would simply, that it would simply mean more freedom, I guess maybe most of us in the military feel like that. I definitely felt, oh my God, finally I can decide where to live. Finally I can. Yes. But transitions are rarely that simple. And because I am also immersed very much in transition work right now, I definitely understand they are rarely that simple, because even difficult systems create familiarity. Yes, the military system is quite difficult, but it was familiar. It was what we knew. It was how our lives were structured. One thing transition experts like William Bridges often emphasize is that every transition begins with an ending. And that's the difference between transition and change. Change begins with a beginning. Transition begins with an ending. And endings are psychologically complex. Even when they're chosen, even when they're positive, even when they create opportunity, because the nervous system still has not adjusted to losing what was familiar. And I was going through that uncertainty. I started noticing uncertainty in places I did not expect. What would life look like now? Where would we live long term? Things I didn't even want to start thinking. I was yearning to start thinking about them, but then when the time came to actually think about them, shock. Yeah. What kind of structure would replace that military life? Who were we outside of this system? And transitions like this definitely affect entire families. And one thing I now understand is that humans become psychologically attached to structure, even imperfect structures. And when that structure changes, our internal world has to recognize and reorganize itself. That reorganization, my dear friend, is transition. I also realized something else. For years, so many of our decisions had been influenced by military life. Where we lived, how we planned, how we parented, how we thought about stability. And now we had to learn how to make decisions differently. This is something many people experience beyond the military too. Yes, my context of this episode is military. But there's a lot that people experience like this. There's retirement, divorce, children leaving home and you finally becoming like an empty nester, career changes, immigration, loss of someone, entrepreneurship. Sometimes the external structure changes and suddenly you have to rediscover how to organize your life internally. One thing I also began understanding more clearly during this season is that transitions require grounding. Because transitions can be deeply, deeply destabilizing. Apart from grounding, there's a lot of other things that actually grounding offers. And apart from just the need to plan, the need to react, grounding is one of the most important things you need during these major life transitions. Grounding might look different for different people. Every time I talk about grounding, I get the the faces that ask like, what exactly do you mean? And I get it, because when I also came up with the grounding part of it. I was like, oh, excuse me, I need to be very clear about what this means. We'll talk about it a little further, and in the checklist, the free one that I'm offering, you're gonna see just what grounding is and how it might look like for you. And the reason you need grounding is because when external structures change, internal stability becomes even more important. When familiar structures disappear, you begin discovering that within you is what within you is actually stable. when you lose that job, or when you're going into a new job, or when you move from one country to another, the things that you believed before, the things that held you steady before, the things that you thought I'm very well versed with, suddenly become questionable. Like, can I survive this country? There's a lot of mathematics going on in your head. But something else was happening too during this time. For the first time in a long time, we had the opportunity to make more intentional decisions. Decisions were very much based on what the military decided. Now it was us. It was not only going to be based on military requirements, but based on the kind of life we actually wanted to build. And that changed everything. And I say this from a very loving place, because a lot of us, as we talk about transition, particularly in the military, we are more focused on one thing: jobs. Even the resources around, even the support around transition is mostly focused on finding the spouse a job and finding the service member a job. We rarely sit back and allow ourselves to understand what this transition actually means. What is it going to change? It's going to change your belief system. It's going to change your structure or lack of it. It's going to change stability. It's going to change what you now base your decisions on. It's going to change things for your children, for you, and for the different things. Career, it's going to change so much. Identity. For those who probably knew about military life before and know, oh, I'm a military spouse, it's going to change. The resources around you are probably going to change too, because there's certain services you can get when you are active duty, others not. So things are going to change, and I'm usually surprised to notice just how much we are focused on finding a job, when sometimes all we need is just to reset, recalibrate, think of who we are before our next steps. Like, if I'm getting a job, what is the job for? Do I want to reimagine myself, or do I want to stay the same person? If I was probably someone doing mechanical work, is that something I want to continue or not? And so we need to rethink about, that transition process very differently. Sorry to have digressed. That's my world, the military world. But this applies, just as I said, in many things: divorce, in motherhood, in changing careers, in moving to different countries. So it applies across the board. Okay? Now, because one of the biggest decisions we have had to make next was where and how we wanted to build stability moving forward. That became another important transition entirely. Where do we go from here now? I remember our last station was where? Maryland? Okay, where do we go? What do we do? I want to remind you that transitions do not only change your circumstances. Transitions change the systems we organize our lives around. And learning to navigate that internally can change everything, because when you're stable internally, your external environment, however chaotic might be, is going to be very manageable. But if things just look good on the outside, but on the inside there's struggle, there's going to be a lot of struggle. Well, if you've ever gone through a transition that changed the structure of your life, I don't know what that is, but I would really love to hear that experience and what it taught you. And if you're navigating a life transition right now, the free grounded transition checklist is linked below, and it can help you begin identifying what may be shifting internally, so you can move through change with more awareness and intention. And I want to expand change, because sometimes it can be very, very vague, and we're thinking, oh, well, I've stayed in the same place 20 years. I've had this job for the last. Change is constant. Something might be changing and you just really don't know. It might be moving from one age to another. So I just want you to have a bigger and a wider understanding of what really transition and change is. So that, just as we are doing here, we are taking control of life. We are not passers-by, gosh, English. We're not passers-by in our own lives. And we're not just existing. We will thrive. If this resonated, please subscribe, like, and share with someone. I'll see you tomorrow.